The reason we live in a peaceful world is because it's masculine, because people in control have these masculine impulses. If it wasn't for that, it would be chaos.
And so, yeah, is that a lie? Is that morally wrong? Arguably. Is it something that's a little fun and kind of makes sense from a utilitarian perspective? Yeah, of course it does.
Whereas if you're strong and you look strong and you have, let's say you're armed or whatever the case is, people are going to think twice, and they may test you, but then they're much more likely for you to be able to say, hey, you don't want to go there, buddy. Look. Basically, strength is what imposes order on the world. This is true in the Christian worldview. We see God as the Almighty. So he is the strongest being in the universe. Well, he's not a being, but anyway, God is Almighty, and God controls everything. And there is a hierarchy that the universe is designed by God. And basically, the reason that we have order, the reason that we have society, is because there is an underlying strength. And as a man, your job is to mimic that, is to reflect that. Basically, you are one of the little nodes in the power structure, and in order to maintain the order around you, you need to be strong enough to enforce that order. Otherwise, chaos seeps in, and it seeps in because you're not there to stop it. So, to underscore what you said, basically, as men, that's your job. You need to be able to resolve conflicts. You need to be brave enough to face them. You need to be smart enough to understand when it's a conflict that needs resolution in, let's say, a diplomatic way versus a by force way, and you need to be capable of enforcing either one, right? So naturally, if you're not physically fit, the ability for you to at least threaten the sort of physical action that needs to be there actually also undercuts your ability to talk your way out of it, right? So if people don't see you as a physical threat, then they're not going to be afraid to just take what they want from you. And that means you're going to have to fight whether you like it or not. Whereas if you're strong and you look strong and you have, let's say you're armed or whatever the case is, people are going to think twice, and they may test you, but then they're much more likely for you to be able to say, hey, you don't want to go there, buddy. Like, look, I'm armed. You know, if you want to take it there, I'm ready to go. They're more likely to de-escalate in that type of situation. So you see how strength actually leads to peace, which is, I think, ties into the original point of the episode, right? Why does might make right? Well, here would be the argument for why the answer is yes. Because through might, we can enforce good things. We can enforce peace. We can enforce prosperity and hold people accountable for when they do bad things. Without might, we can't do those things, right? So, you know, that's I guess that's how I would put that. You have anything
and
else
I
to
like
say
what
about
you said specifically when you said the thing that, you know, when you touched on might equals right, and just now in your hypothetical, when you said you need to be able to have just the ability to enforce threaten violence, just that ability to threaten violence, just the thought in your head, right? And you said armed, etc. And again, if you're not able to physically defend yourself, then yeah, that's an option for you. I mean, that's why, you know, I made this joke before, but, you know, God made men and Colt made men equal. So you have that option available for you. And I think that this is something that kind of ties into training yourself to be able to handle situations. Because I think if you, as you pointed out, if you're actually in a position to use violence if needed, violence is less likely to happen to you, right? And this actually strengthens their argument. And when I say their, I mean going back to the liberal argument of, if we just impose our physical might onto Russia, then the whole world is going to understand that no one can do this stuff around us, etc. And again, they're fed that talking point from Lockheed Martin, right? They're injected into it, you know, etc. But I'm curious to see, because for me, I always thought, okay, you know, I'm having a son soon. I'm always thinking, like, what am I going to propagandize him to like what sport, right? Is it going to be jiu-jitsu? Is it going to be rock climbing? Is it going to be, you know, parkour? What is it going to be? Mm-hmm. And I'm leaning towards jiu-jitsu because this is something that I always hear people say in jiu-jitsu community is like, they are literally in physical controlled situations, and they train you in jiu-jitsu to detain somebody. And that's why earlier when I couldn't think of the word that you used that I like, it just now popped back into my head, de-escalate. The way you said de-escalate, it made me think, okay, it is true that the strongest people can de-escalate the situation, right? strongest physically, strongest with arms, etc., what have you. But that person, just because he is strong, does not mean he will de-escalate. So it
Right.
takes a good person, morally speaking, and this is where we get into the question, to be both able to and is willing to and is going to use peace as a de-escalating tactic with a threat of violence.
Right.
So what I mean by that is this: I have been detained by police officers before, for this, that, and the other. But the good one, the good ones will always the strongest police officers. They will very calm and say, "Hey, you are detained, and we're gonna get this figured out, and etc. But don't worry, everything's fine." They're calm. They're calm because they
Right.
know, and I'm calm too. I'm not gonna escalate. I have no cards. I'm not Zelensky. I'm not gonna say, "Well, this, that, and the other." I'm just
Right.
gonna. I'm actually gonna use my Fifth Amendment right and say, "It's all good. I'm
Yep.
detained."
Yep.
And that kind of mutual understanding, he's in control. He has dominion over me for that 10 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever. I'm not going to pretend that he's not in control of that situation. He's armed.
Right.
I'm not armed. If I was armed, I'm not allowed to use my arms against him because he has qualified immunity, whatever. So I'm just going to accept that he is in control of the situation. And I'm allowing it. I'm going to give agency to him, right? And so that being said, he knows that I recognize that. And this benevolent cop, we'll call it a benevolent cop, he says, "Hey, I'm going to quickly figure out like what's going on here. There must be some kind of confusion. You did give me a quick anecdote of what happened here." So he just does his due diligence and says, "Hey, let me look at here and see, okay." And he says, "Hey, I got the wrong guy. You're free to go." And he apologizes for detaining me. And that's it. It's just a 5 second, 5 minute, whatever interaction that could have gone from 0 to death immediately if I
Right.
started, chimping out and saying, "Hey, I didn't do anything." And if I start raising my hands and escalating, this gentleman here is peaceful. He knows that I know that we both understand the power dynamic, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
kind of a weird kind of anecdote there, but it's I think it makes sense to tie into here, right? Because if you do know
Yeah.
that, yeah, if you do know that you're in capable control of situations, there is an understanding and agreement. And I kind of want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you agree without saying it that the other person is in charge?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've also been detained, so I can point to that. Even just when I was younger and smaller and just maybe not. I mean, even today, I don't know that I'd be good at fighting. I haven't been in a fight in a very long time, but
Yeah,
I'd be more willing to take it on. But there was a time in my life where I definitely wasn't. So yeah, I mean, I could point to a number of things like that, and I do think this ties in, by the way. So I wanted to sort of steer it a little bit, but what we're describing, what you just described, is a very masculine perspective, right?
exactly.
So men, I think as men, we sort of instinctively understand that this is the way the world works, right? I mean, when you're a kid, you're a boy. Every boy is wrestling with their friends. Every single one of them. We've all done that, right? And I'm sure girls do it too. But for boys, it's like your favorite thing to do, right? Like I remember wrestling with all my best friends, probably all the way till like middle school. We're all like we get on the trampoline and we'd literally have tournaments. That's what we would do. We'd literally sit there and organize tournaments of like wrestling just with your boys, and it's fun, But it's fun, but there is an unsaid like layer of we all know who the strongest one is, right? We all know who is holding back. Like when kid A is wrestling kid B and kid A is like one of the big kids and kid B is one of the little kids, everybody knows that kid A is not going full force, right? Because if he did, he would hurt the little one. And even kid B knows that, I think. I'll be honest with you, I was always the big kid, but I presume that the little kid always knows that too. Yeah. But and again, it's not even like as the big kid, I'm looking down on kid B. Like I'm holding back because I don't want to hurt him. He's my friend, but I do enjoy wrestling with him. And a lot of times he'll pull out some move because he's not as strong as me. So he needs to get creative, right? And he'll surprise me. And I actually enjoy that. I enjoy when he comes up with something new and then I have to combat that, right? So anyway, the point is that as men, you have this instinctive understanding. It's born in you as a little boy. You start to develop this understanding of hierarchies in the world, and then ideally, by the time you get into adulthood, you're positioned to start accepting these, like the example you gave, where hey, if I get detained, I know I'm the little kid right now. I'm the little kid in this wrestling, and this guy's holding back. I know he's holding back, and I'm glad he is because I don't want to get hurt. I'm the little kid here, so I'm going to respect that, and I'm grateful to him for holding back. Thank you, and I will in turn be respectful. And you see how this builds up a stable and peaceful interaction where we can just sort of resolve whatever it was that went wrong. Okay, so how does this connect to? This also connects to the previous subject we were talking about, which is like propaganda. Okay, so this type of like masculine understanding is being carved out of our society, right? Boys and men are basically attacked from a young age and told that being masculine is toxic, that there is such a thing as toxic masculinity. And what I always understood that to mean is that there's a way to be too masculine. And if you're too masculine, then that's actually bad, which implies that there's some happy medium. And it just happens to be wherever the feminists, want you, right? But that's what happens is traditional masculinity gets stripped away, but then everything that Tony and I just explained about like stable and peaceful and mutually understanding interactions between two people with varying levels of power also gets cut out. So just as I said earlier, where in order to enforce peace, there needs to be an underlying threat of like strength and violence. Well, you've taken away the underlying threat because it made feminists uncomfortable, right? But now, because the underlying threat of violence is gone, so is the peace. Now the world is more chaotic. Now
Right.
people can get away with stuff because men are afraid to act masculine, right? So
No,
what do you have to
exactly.
say
That's
about that?
perfectly well. I would call that a weave, and I think you got
Yeah,
that from Trump, and it was a good weave. And I think
yeah,
it was perfectly well weaved because that actually is something I wasn't even thinking about, and you segued it right into a perfectly weaved situation. And I think I would say masculinity is under attack is not even a controversial claim. That's just
yeah,
people. That's a fact, right?
yeah,
And it even goes back to what you're talking about. Age 5, 6, 7, you're wrestling with the boys, and maybe 10, 11, 12, you're wrestling with the boys, and you got the one guy that's like a little bit too sensitive, and you just don't allow him back in the group. You just say, hey, you're
right,
not playing with us. We
right,
don't want
yep,
you involved because you're going to be involving adults and saying, hey, he hurt me. Meh. Well,
right,
you consented to it. I mean, get out of the
yeah,
group. And
yep,
and
yep,
and again, so one thing about that anecdote, and I'll give my own little anecdote too about that in a second, but there is a hierarchy even at that level, right? We're just
yes,
biologically trained to know that there's a hierarchy, and that is
yes,
the strongest person is going to ruin this for all of us if he goes full force, right? It's not
right,
fun. So what's fun though for that strong person to be humbled by somebody stronger in a different external situation, right? So
right,
even using you as an example, maybe if you're in fifth grade and you're wrestling the boys, if an eighth grader was wrestling you, you'd be humbled and say, "Hey,
yeah, yeah,
I've got growth. I could grow, And
absolutely,
going back to that, we live in a post-wartime modernity where it's even not even it doesn't even have to be physical. You can even be playing GoldenEye, and the best
yeah.
GoldenEye player on your street was always you. Obviously, everyone is the best GoldenEye player on the street. That's like a
Of course, yeah. Whoever you
it's like the
ask, that's who
Mandela
it is.
effect. It's like the
Yeah,
GoldenEye effect, right?
yeah,
But Super Smash Brothers Melee, you're playing that as a kid, and you got
yeah,
that one guy on your street that's so good that you don't even want to play with him because he's gonna make it not fun for everybody. But
right,
you play with him anyway, and that guy knows that. He knows that he's so much better than everybody that he has to play worse or play in a different character, play more
yeah,
to allow it make more fun, right?
yeah,
Because in that context of modernity, might equals right is translated to skill equals, I guess, will, if you will. I don't know,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
in that case, it just translates to things that aren't just physical strength. And I'll use one more example. If you're on Wall Street and you have 10 people that are investing, the best investor is kind of known as, hey, I'm the best top dog here. And everybody else can kind of like, I can give advice here and there and this, that, and the other, but there's even alphas in the room when it doesn't even come to physical might. It comes to expertise at that situation.
right,
But at the end of the day, if there is a war that breaks out, or if there's a violent situation that breaks out, physical strength and the ability to impose that physical strength is going to be the number one preferred trait at that time, right? So
yes, yes,
that's why post modernity, like, it doesn't have to be wrestling. It doesn't have to be arming yourself with the Colt. It could be something else, and ties
yeah,
into society and ties into modernity because there's an attack on masculinity, and people are being told, hey, if you're actually a little bit feminine, women will like you more.
right.
Let's ask that question. Does that pass the not test? I mean,
Do women,
it
yeah, are the feminine attracted to other feminine, right? Like, it's funny because in a subtle way, yes, right?
of course it does,
But,
right? It passes
right,
the not test because it's not
yeah,
true. It's a controversial.
yeah,
It
yeah,
itself is a controversial claim. It's so
right,
ridiculous on its face that it's saying, hey, we need to tell men to not be masculine and say, hey, women are actually attracted to people who talk about their feelings more or
yep,
write journals about the Notebook, the movie, or go see Brokeback Mountain at midnight when it drops and talk about how much they
Cry
love it.
and share your trauma. Yeah.
Right.
Women love that.
So
Women can't wait to hear
women love
about,
that.
your your sad stories. Oh, they love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a way they're used. That's a tactic that people are using to attack masculinity by saying, "Oh, this is actually what women want."
Yep.
Women themselves, if push comes to shove, will admit to you, no, they don't want that. They
Right.
want a strong, capable, secure man
Right.
because they don't want to be ever in a situation where they have to think, "Am I going to be the one that has to impose violence here to solve the
Right.
situation?" Because in
Right.
90% of situations that they're in, they can't. They're not the strongest person in the room, so they can't do that. So they need help.
Yes.
And again, so this is something that people use as a tactic to say, hey, let's shut down masculinity at its peak. Even at age 11, they're saying, hey, don't wrestle.
Right.
Hey, don't stop horseplaying. Stop
Rough
horseplaying is
housing.
something that you're
Horseplay.
trained
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
trained to just ignore that in a good way.
Yeah.
You should be.
Yeah.
When I was
Yeah.
11 years old and somebody said, stop horseplaying, I just kept horseplaying because that's what that means.
Yeah, of course.
Stop horseplaying
Yeah.
means
you
keep
wait till they're
horseplaying.
not looking and you start again. Yeah.
So kicking it over to you, like how is even that small claim of stop horseplaying kind of ruining society? I know it sounds like a ridiculous
Yeah.
thing to say, but
Well, it does sound ridiculous, but it isn't. Everything is everything. Man. The every Things can't just happen in a broad sweeping motion. Like the feminists couldn't just come out in the 20s or whatever and say, "Hey, no more masculinity because we want women to be equal, to have to take power in society, and we want to destroy the family because of that, and we want to make sure men are not allowed to be men, and we want to make it impossible to date because we're going to fill these men with these stupid ideas about how to talk to women and how bad masculinity." None of these things can be said because they're not even thinking about it. It's all a slow buildup. Like no roughhousing, no horseplay. Like you said, it's almost like a rite of passage. Like I think even as a parent, you must know that I'm telling you not to do this, but I know you're going to do it. Like surely you must, if you're sensible, if you have any brain in your head whatsoever, you must understand that when you tell your child not to do something, there's a very good chance they're just going to go do it anyway. Especially if they're having fun. Like if it's something that they're clearly enjoying, they're going to go back and do it. So it's almost like a rite of passage. Like, hey, I'm the parent and I'm technically supposed to forbid this, so just don't do it. But then the kid's like, sure thing, Dad, I got you. And then they're going to go around the corner and start doing it again. And it's like, the kid knows that they're rebelling, and the parent knows, like, yeah, he's probably ignoring me, and he's going to come back running with a bloody nose or whatever. But whatever, I'm just going to have to live with that. But it's just it's part of growing up. It's a natural thing that we all go through. And you can't attack it. You can't eliminate it. It'll never be eliminated, and nor should it be. It's just the way boys learn to interact with the world. And it leads to everything else. Like you brought up, like, do women respect like strength, or do they even want masculinity when it comes to dating? Right? Of course they do. Of course they do. It's just like asking, does a man want femininity? Like, of course they do. What do you mean? Like, why would we not? It's a polarity, right? Think of the yin and the yang. Like, there's a masculine and there's a feminine, and the relationship works because there are two sides joining together. That's what makes it lovely and beautiful. That's the spiritual component of this. Of course, they need masculinity, and of course, men need femininity. And I believe that the stronger the polarity in the relationship, the better it is, because a woman cannot fully embody masculinity ever, no matter what. I mean, she can put on a mask, she can try her best, but it's never going to be completely there. And just the same way a man cannot fully embody femininity. Again, put on a mask, put on a dress, put on the lipstick, walk into the bathroom, but it's never really the same thing, right? So you need a man to be fully masculine and a woman to be fully feminine. That's how these things fit together. And that's what's under attack. And I think it's really sad. I think it's a main driver of the loneliness epidemic, which we've talked many times. But hopefully this conversation was illustrative to you, because we talked about might equals right, and we talked about propaganda, and now I think it's clear how those both weave into even something as seemingly disconnected as dating. Right? It's still there. It's the same thing that's going on. There's a propaganda feeding you a certain narrative, and it just happens to be connected. Yeah, the fact that you're struggling on dating apps is directly related to the fact that we're sending billions of dollars of money to Ukraine. Yes. In fact, they are directly related. Like, it sounds crazy to you, but hopefully we've explained a little bit about why that is.
Well, no, and I think it's perfectly said because there is a loneliness epidemic, and a lot of it is caused by people listening to things they shouldn't be listening to, in my opinion, right? Things that you and I just shut out immediately when somebody, for example, as something as benign as stop horseplaying. Yeah, and you pointed out correctly. You said there's a rite of passage. You do have to kind of say this, that, and the other. And I want to give two anecdotes. One is I have two nieces, and one of them, well, my brother was over, who was the father of of my nieces, and he asked, hey, like, what did she, who did that? Because one of them did something wrong, and immediately the older one was like, no, she did it, and I as the uncle, because he's not allowed to do this, I had as the uncle had to teach her, hey, let's practice something. Ready? I'm gonna ask you who did that, and you're gonna say I don't know. Ready? Hey, who did that? And she said I don't know. And I'm like, perfect. Let's try it again. And so I kind of taught her, and a lot of parents are out there screaming at me, but as the uncle, it's my job to teach her this because her parents can't.
Yeah.
It's that you have a code of silence, and to a certain extent, if your little sister or little brother did something, or older brother did something wrong or whatever, and that your parents disagree with, let them handle it their way. Let the older brother confess to that if they choose to. Don't choose to rat them out, because one day, hey, you're going to do something that your parents don't want you to do, and you need your older brother to back you up in that case too. There's a code of silence for a reason, right? And
Yeah.
the second anecdote I'll give related to that is when I was growing up, I had two older brothers, right? So I learned that might equals right. I think at age 4 or 5, I learned that pretty early, because there is always that unspoken. My oldest brother is there's a hierarchy, right? When we drive to the grocery store, who gets to sit in the front seat? If my oldest brother's there, if number 1 is there, he gets to. If he's not there, number 2 gets to. If he's not there, I get to sit in the front seat. That's how it worked. There's no rotation. There's no egalitarian system. It's just might equals right. Okay?
Exactly.
And that's simply the case. My mother understood that. She didn't want to argue with it. We wrestled each other for it, and it was it. And we didn't wrestle all the time. We just did it a couple times and said, okay, he proved his strength, and that's it. And I wasn't resentful to them because of it. I just knew, hey, this is the case, and I thank them for not imposing violence for unnecessarily, only as needed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And
So
like you
what
said,
that ties in-
once it's resolved, it's resolved. You don't need to keep. There's no rehashing it. It's been done. We know where everybody stands, and that's the way it is. Right.
Right.
It's more peaceful than the alternative.
Right. And the contrast of that is if we had a system in place for, we got into trouble here and there, not too much, but enough to where the parents would say, hey, what happened? They'd go out to, maybe they'd be at work or something, and one of us would break a dish, right? And maybe it was me. Well, we had a rotation where somebody would take blame for something, even if they didn't do it. And that we had a system for that, just so that we could kind of space out, hey, maybe if my brother wanted to go to a party this weekend and he broke a dish, I'll take blame for it so that he doesn't get grounded for the party, and I could stay home that weekend, no problem, right? In exchange, he would say, hey, next time you do something stupid, I'll say it was me, and then we'll kind of go from there as long as we agree on it. But we had a number one rule is if we didn't discuss it, the default answer is I don't know, right? And that works. The code of silence works when you have to really get through and maneuver life, because in this case, might equals right means my stepdad is the ultimate authority, right? And we don't want him to have any excuse to say, hey, let's punish this person or that person. Let's just have a code of silence to make him figure it out himself. Just like the Fifth Amendment, kind of, you're not responsible to prove your guilt to the officer. It's his duty to prove that you're guilty, right?
Right.
So you're not going to do his job for him. Just like that, as kids at a young age, we figured that out. We're not going to do that for him. Hey, you got to figure that out yourself. So we all agreed, hey, I don't know. Hey, who broke that dish? I'm not sure. I don't know. And so, is that a lie? Is that morally wrong? Arguably. Is it something that's a little fun and kind of makes sense from a utilitarian perspective? Yeah, of course it does.
So again, it's part of becoming a man. Like it's fun. It's fun. You skirt the edge. You find the boundaries. Is what little boys do, especially. They push. They push and they push. They want to know where is the boundary, and that's the father's role in the home, is to set it. Hey, you can push. Go ahead. I know you're going to do it, but there's a point you're going to come to where I will not let you go any further, and I'm going to put my foot down, and you're going to run into the wall, right? And then as a boy, then you found out, okay, hey, that's where it is. I won't go there again, right? It's just like this is a very masculine way to live life, and I think that's extends very very nicely to what we're saying with like just politics. I mean, this is how these things have to be sorted out. It has to be in a masculine way. The reason we live in a peaceful world is because it's masculine. Because the people in control have these masculine impulses. If it wasn't for that, it would be chaos. That's what I hope the feminists can eventually understand, is like by trying to debase and demonize masculinity, you're making the world more dangerous. You're literally ruining this setup that has allowed you to have the rights and the privileges that you have. You're just stripping that away.